October was the month where I brought my Kindle literally everywhere. Now this has multiple reasons. I was at my parents for a week where I read a lot on my Kindle. But that's also the explanation why out of the 22 books I read in October, only 8 were physical copies. But let's get into every single book I read in October. Hi, hello, and welcome everybody to a brand new wrap-up. The month of October, it's almost the end of the year. My favorite month is upon us. It's November. But let us talk about the books, all of the books, because honestly, there were some good ones. You could say I read 19 books in October instead of 22 because 3 of those were DNFs. I think we're just gonna jump into those first, and after that we can talk about all the books that I liked. So let's just start with the books that I absolutely could not finish for the life of me. The first book and also the most shocking book that I had to DNF was The Striker by Anna Huang. Now, I did read this on Kindle Unlimited. I had the copy pre-ordered. I couldn't do it. I really tried my best and I could not do it for the life of me. It was impossible. It wasn't anything bad with the storyline. This is a soccer player romance, but the dialogues in this were just so horrible that I physically cringed and I couldn't finish the book. The first kiss scene, it was described in an absurd amount of detail. Wait, do you want me to find it? I read 160 pages, okay, that's good. But it says, the world burst into a kaleidoscope of sensation. I grasped, shocked by the sudden onslaught. Asher used the opportunity to deepen the kiss, sliding his tongue inside and exploring my mouth with such lazy sensuality that any resistance I might have had simply flowed away. It was weird. Okay, the writing in this, it made me feel uncomfortable, therefore I could not for the life of me finish it. This book was a no for me, and we're just gonna move on because I don't want to talk about this book anymore. The next book was also a sports romance. This is The Risk, the second book in the Briar You series, which is the sequel series to the Off-Campus series by Al Kennedy. Now, that I've explained where this book comes from, let me tell you why I didn't like it. I did not enjoy either of the characters, and I felt extremely bored while reading this. So bored that I just decided never to finish it because what on earth am I even doing? We have fake dating, which usually I love. In this case, I hated it. I don't know why. Probably because I didn't like the characters. Probably because I didn't see any chemistry between them. I thought this relationship that they had was not a good one, and it just didn't seem realistic to me that these two would end up together. I did have the book about 50-60% through, I think, and I didn't care enough to finish the book. And that's fine. I think more people should DNF books if they don't feel like reading them. And then the third and last book I DNF'd was A Light in the Flame. You might have seen it in the vlog that I made, but I just could not deal with this book anymore. It was so boring, and I just didn't care anymore, to the point where I was debating why I was even doing this. Why was I torturing myself through this book? It wasn't bad per se, but I just couldn't relate to the characters. It's been too long since I read the first book. I really loved the first book, don't get me wrong. And I was hoping to love this one as well, but I just couldn't get into it. It wasn't even that the book was bad. It was just so boring that I was just like, no, you know what? I have better things to do with my time and better things to read. So I just stopped, put it away, and I will probably never be picking it up again. Now that we've talked about the worst, let me talk about the better parts of the month, because there were some good books in here. I'm gonna sort the rest of these, and you've probably already seen down here, but I'm gonna sort them by genre. So we're gonna start with the one and only thriller that I read, and that was She's Too Pretty to Burn. I personally really liked this thriller because there was romance in it. I'm a romance girly. You can't just take romance away from me and be like, here's a book. I'm not gonna enjoy it. This one was weird, confusing, disturbing, but also a little bit romantic. So I was into it. The preface of this book is you have 2 female main characters and they see each other for the first time and they fall in love, right? That's where everything's still normal. We're still in the normal range. But one of them has this best friend. He is an artist slash environmental activist, but the bad kind of environmental activism, right? The kind that burns forests. He has this huge plan that nobody really knows what's happening, but people realize that things are like going wrong. And then suddenly there's dead bodies. People are drowning. It's a whole thing. And they're trying to figure out what's happening before these two end up dead as well. It's cool. It's the most toxic thing I've ever read, alright? It's super toxic, but it's also good because at the same time you're always like, how can this get worse? The situation. How can the situation get worse? And it does get worse every single page. So it's fun. I've never heard anybody talk about it, but I enjoyed it, and that's that. Now let me move on to dark romance. And I actually have a physical copy of this one. This is Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. And this is a stalker romance. After I finished this book, I went to my friend and I was like, you know what? He is stalking her, but at some point he asked for consent, so we're fine. The funniest thing about this book is that we have a few chapters that are out of her perspective and a few chapters that are out of his perspective. And he is just such an awkward and lovable character. It's super fun to me. So the preface is he makes mask thirst traps on TikTok. Alright, that's his job. That's what he does. And she is a nurse and she watches his thirst traps. He found out that she watches his videos. So he sees his chance and he starts low-key stalking her, like breaking into her apartment and filming videos on her bed. It's a whole thing. For some reason, she's kind of scared, but also very into it. She's not as naive as other people in dark romances. Sometimes in dark romances, our female main characters are super, super naive. She understands that what's happening is weird and maybe a little wrong. She also understands that she really, really likes it. And at the same time, he is kind of giving her the space to be like, okay, I don't actually want this. So I felt more comfortable than I do with other dark romances. This one was a fun one and I enjoyed it. I can actually encourage you to read this book because it was a fun one. A dark one, but a fun one. Now let's move on to billionaire romances. You all want it. I'm gonna give you the billionaire romances. Or rather, I'm gonna give you the scoop on the billionaire romances that I read. Starting with this book. This is The Auction. It's the first book in a series. I read the first and the second book. If I say they were alright, I think I would be lying. They were entertaining, but also to a point where I was like, why am I doing this to myself? This is a second chance romance where he is the billionaire and 10 years ago he broke his girlfriend's heart. Now she's back at this club trying to auction herself off so that she gets more money, right? She needs money. And so he's breaking his like celibacy, I think, to be with her and to get her out of that auction. It's a whole thing. And then they have to get married. I think that's mostly it. I really, really did not enjoy this one. The second one was better. So we're just gonna move on to that one. This one, I think I rated this 1 star. I was not okay with it. So this is the second book in the series. It's The Consequence, and we have another second chance romance, but this time with a baby. Our female main character, Nori, she got pregnant with our main character's child, right? And in the beginning of the book, she gets into an accident. He gets a call from the hospital being like, your son's in the hospital. The mother of your son was in an accident and he's here. So he then takes care of this child, this little itty-bitty child, and then kind of forces her to marry him in order to keep the child, which I thought was a horrendous move, but at the same time, it kind of went with the storyline. This one was a lot more fun, mostly because you could tell that the characters actually had feelings, and I kind of enjoyed it. It was good, it was a fun time. Again, a billionaire romance, right? So what else would you expect? The next book I read was The Secret Fiancé, which is also a billionaire romance, but it's also kind of a student-teacher, well, professor-student romance. He's like a tech billionaire, and she is also in tech. And it's also an arranged marriage. The pieces are flying back to me right now. They are supposed to be married, but she kind of says, okay, you know what, I can't be with you because I'm about to be married. She doesn't know that she's marrying him, it's a whole thing, but they both kind of like each other, and then he comes back as her professor, and then they actually get married, and everything is a little weird, but also everything is a little fun. So if this sounds interesting to you, why don't you pick it up? It was cool. And then the last billionaire romance I read was The Snapshot. I finished this last night, like last minute I finished this so that I could put it in this wrap up for you because I wanted to. The Snapshot is a friends to lovers, but a kind of, okay, I've always been in love with you situation. So we have 2 best friends who met 3 years ago in Vegas. Skip 3 years, the grandma died and left the company to his wife. He doesn't have a wife, so the two of them decide to marry. It's a whole thing, so it's kind of a marriage of convenience, but also a very instantaneous love story because they've known each other for so long. The thing that made me really dislike this book and not be interested in it anymore were the time skips. We had a lot of time jumps into the past that really bothered me. I did not enjoy that, and I also didn't enjoy the conflict of the book, which was kind of the main topic. Alrighty, and now let's move on to sports romance. Real quick, this is The Wingman. This is the third book in the Vancouver Storm series. This was so much fun. I love literally every book that Stephanie Archer has ever written. I've loved it. If you have never picked up a book by Stephanie Archer, please do. This is, again, a best friends to lovers romance. It's also like a lessons in love romance story where she is not as experienced and he is going to teach her. So he starts out being her dating coach. It's a whole thing. It's a very cute romance. I absolutely adored The Wingman. I had a great time reading it. I inhaled this book. This book is also on Kindle Unlimited, but I loved it so much that I got the physical copy of it. So that's a good sign, and a sign that you should probably pick it up if you're into hockey romances. Anyway, let's move on to the next hockey romance, which is Face Off. Face Off is a hockey romance where we have a female hockey player joining an NFL team. It's very fun though because at first they're kind of like little enemies, but then they kind of figure out that they're on the same team and they were playing for the same goal, and then they fall in love. It's great. I liked this. This was so much fun. It is on Kindle Unlimited as well, and I specifically read this because I wanted to read the second book in the series, which had just come out, so I then went on to read Power Play, which is, again, the second book. This is about a very grumpy goalie. It's, again, one of these, like, I'm gonna teach you how to date, so like this dating coach thing, where at the same time, she is working for the team as like a reporter and he doesn't do interviews. But I saw like one of those posts online advertising the book where it was just like, he never does interviews, but he interviews with her because he really likes her. And I was like, let me read this book. This sounds super fun. It's just giving this whole I hate everyone in the world but you vibe, and I just really had a good time reading this book. Who am I kidding? It was so much fun. What are we expecting me to do here? Like, what do you want from me? Another sports romance that I read was Close Knit. This is a soccer or football romance, depending on where you live. I'm gonna say football because I live in Germany and I grew up here, so I'm saying football. And in the book, they also say football because the book is set in the UK. Our male main character, he's a football player, and our female main character is a knitting influencer, which is also the reason why I started knitting. They've had a one-night stand and it was like actually kind of true love, and now he's just angry because he thinks she's stalking him. She doesn't really know what's going on because she's just a nice person, but at the same time they then start kind of like dating. But this is probably about the healthiest relationship I've ever read about in a sports romance. They talk to each other, they fix their problems together, there is no third act breakup. This one was such a fun one, and he's just such a supportive boyfriend that I was just like gushing about him the entire time because, let's be honest, he's a good guy. And I really enjoyed this book, and I might also have to get it. Maybe I'll get it for my birthday. Who knows? I don't know. Alright, and then let's move on to small town romance. I'm gonna say small town romance because I have a few cowboy romances in here, but also just like general small town romances. So we're gonna start this with Two Can Play. I know this is not technically a small town romance, and it's also just a novella. This is the Ali Hazelwood novella that just came out in audio form, so I listened to the audiobook. It's about 4 hours, so relatively short. It's cute, it's adorable. It's about two video game designers who work in like kind of enemy companies, but they have to work together to make the perfect video game. It's a classic Ali Hazelwood book in the sense that he has always been obsessed with her and she thinks he hates her. And I think that's mostly everything you need to know. If you've loved every other book by Ali Hazelwood, you're gonna enjoy this too. Okay? It's nothing new, but it's good. So if you're into this and you need something quick to read, maybe give this a listen and check it out. I then also read a Christmas romance book. Yes, I did. And I loved it. This is If This Was a Movie. Okay? The sentence, if this was a movie, what would you do, was in there so much. She is a romance movie enthusiast. okay? He is a single dad in a small town, but again, it's a second chance romance. So a few years ago, we have our female main character, Jules, and our male main character, Nate, and they meet at a bar, they hit it off, it's like an insta-love situation, and so she stays at his house for like a day or two because they're snowed in, and then the next day, she sees him at the grocery store with a child and a woman, and she's like, no, I cannot do that. So she blocks him, there's no contact for a year, but they're both still thinking about it, and then a year later on Christmas, his little daughter runs up to him and is like, I want her for Christmas. I want you to marry her. And it's the girl again, right? So we have kind of like a second chance, but also like a kind of nanny situation. His family is very adorable. It's very cute, very supportive. I liked this whole thing. It was a cuddly, warm, emotional Christmas story. So if you're looking for a Christmas story already in November, this one is one that I can highly recommend. It was fun, it was cute. It's also good if you just don't care about the Christmas stuff. You just read it and it's just a regular romance that just happens to be around Christmas time. Overall, I think this is worth checking out. Now let's move on to the actual small town romance. This is Cash. Cash is a cowboy, but it's also a book that is a cowboy romance. Our female main character inherits her dad's farm after he died. However, that was not really what was in the cards for the people on the farm, and especially for Cash, who thought he was gonna inherit the farm. But when this city girl just turns up and turns everything upside down, he's not really happy. So we have like a cowboy possessive romance, but at the same time we have like an enemies to lovers because he absolutely cannot stand her. It's cute, it's good, it's comfortable. I liked this. This was probably one of my favorite cowboy romances that I read this month. I liked it. After that, I read the Griffith Brothers series. First book is Dust Storm. It's a cute romance. He's a very possessive, but also like very small town southern guy who's like, I'm gonna open the door for you, and if it takes us years, I'm gonna open that stupid door for you. But the book was fun, the book was good, I had a good time, because after this, I immediately went into the second book, which I thought was cooler. Because the second book was Downpour. In this one, our male main character is hurt. He's a bull rider. He got hurt, he got in an accident, he was in the hospital, he was in physical therapy, he's now in a wheelchair, and he needs assistance, but he's super grumpy. He doesn't want help. But then there's this ray of sunshine girl who's sent out by an agency to help him manage his life, and this is, of course, their romance. It's cute, it's adorable. I think this was my favorite out of the series. But then I also read book 3, which is Fireline. Fireline is about the third brother in that family. This is set after the first 2 books, obviously, when they decided to start a restaurant on the property and they get in a new chef. He hates that there's a restaurant on his farm. He doesn't want new people there. He's just done with it. So he kind of tries to do like little sabotages. Then actual horrible stuff happens, and he's the one who helps our female main character. It's cute. It's, again, a grumpy cowboy romance. What more could you want? How many grumpy guys can be in like one family? Apparently 3. It's cute, it's adorable. I liked this entire series. It was very fun. I'm probably gonna get all of these as paperbacks at some point because I really enjoyed them. This was a cute series and I can only encourage you to read them. All right, and now let's move to the second to last category, which is, of course, monster romance. We're gonna start with the one and only werewolf or like Omegaverse story that I read, which is Not the One They Want. This is kind of like an rejection Omegaverse story where she comes to this new pack. She is really scared and they have a vendetta against her. So there's like, I think there's 4 alphas and she's the Omega that comes into the pack and is supposed to mate with all of them. However, they refuse the mating and want to like send her away, but she's staying because she's stubborn. It's also a little weird. I didn't really love it, but I also didn't hate it. So overall, I think this was like a 2.5 star book. It was all right. It was fine, but it wasn't the best thing ever. And then, of course, I read a series of monster romances. I'm gonna put them here at the side for you guys. These are classic monster romances, okay? I'm not gonna say anything more. This is Nora's Kraken, Kenna's Dragon, and Ophelia's Vampire. okay? These are the classic monster romances that have a cute, like, billionaire-ish plotline. So you have the fated mates trope in each of these. They were all a little different, but I enjoyed them overall. I thought they were good. These still had a plotline that I really enjoyed, each of them. And with that, I believe we are finally moving on to the last category, which is the fantasy books. I did read a few fantasy books. Let's start with the one that's maybe a little questionable. I read Glass. This is a reverse harem story where she is kind of Cinderella. So it's a Cinderella retelling, but actually this is Cinderella's stepsister, and Cinderella is already the princess and she gets punished for being a horrible stepsister. So she's kind of like imprisoned with these 3 brothers who are all in love with her. You can see where this can go off the rails, and it actually did. It's fun. Also very spicy. The next book I read was this, We All Fall Down. I read this in the same reading vlog as of Light in the Flame. This was supposed to be the worst book on my Goodreads. It wasn't the worst book. It was accurate to the 2.5-star rating that it had on Goodreads. However, it was just that. It wasn't horrible, but it also wasn't really my cup of tea. It was very confusing. It was very fast-paced. This is about 4 young adults who are part of changing the world, and they have prophecies about each other. I read the book. I remember the book, I can't explain what it's about. It's a little weird, and I don't quite know what it was about it that was weird, but it just was. One of my favorite books of last month was Spice Road. I also finished this yesterday. Yes, I did a lot of reading yesterday. It was Halloween. Leave me be. This was fun. This was cute. This is The Spice Road. I liked it. We have a kind of desert world where magic is in the spice, and you then drink the spice as a tea, and then the person has magic. So our female main character, she's like a protector of the people. Her brother disappeared a year ago, but she then learns that her brother might still be alive, and he is just beyond the desert, beyond the sandstorms, where there is no magic. And she then decides to go search for her brother together with her arch nemesis. This book is filled with betrayals. It's filled with so much violence, actually. For the fact that this is technically a young adult book, it's very violent, but I loved it. It was so much fun. The whole desert vibe, the whole feeling of it, I just really enjoy that. This one made me want to read more fantasy again. I know I only finished it yesterday, but I think I'm going to pick up another fantasy book today. So if that isn't a sign to pick up Spice Road, I don't know what is. I then also read Skin of the Sea, which is a retelling of The Little Mermaid, but make it a little more brutal again. This one was good. So our female main character is one of the mermaids that are supposed to carry the souls of those who drowned in the ocean to safety, to carry them on into the afterlife. That's her job. That's what she does. But she accidentally finds somebody who is currently drowning, and so she saves his life. And then these two have to travel in order to save the world, to save the kingdom, to save everything, and it's just a whole journey. What I did not realize is that there is a second book to this, and I actually think I might need it because, of course, this ended on a cliffhanger, so I'm very excited for that. I specifically liked her as a character and how determined she was. I really, really like that. And I like that book as well. And with that, we're actually at the end of all the books. These are all the books I read. I had a good month with some exceptions, but overall I would say I had a good reading month. However, my plan for November is to read more actual books that I have on my TBR. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and consider subscribing if you don't already, and I will see you soon for the next video that I make. Goodbye everybody and have an awesome day. I feel like I forgot a book because this was the month where I was not using Goodreads and I was also not using my reading journal to note down the books. So all I have is my Kindle reading history in my Kindle app and just remembering the books I read, which that never goes well. That's fun. Anyway, I hope you have an awesome day and goodbye.
That feeling that we said goodbye too soon.